Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.
Good evening. When you walk into the voting booth tomorrow, you'll be confronted with choices about the United States Senate, the U.S. Congress, and of course the state legislature. But you'll also be asked tomorrow to decide on 2 proposed changes in the state constitution and what would be a major change in the state's tax system. Tonight we're going to try as best we can to lay out the arguments for and against each of those measures, hoping to give you a little more information tomorrow on which to base your decision. The first issue we'll discuss tonight is a constitutional amendment that would change existing constitutional language, allowing legislative districts to divide counties. That provision, ignored really for many years, provoked the recent long battle over legislative reapportionment in Idaho and resulted in a court-ordered reapportionment plan that is in place for tomorrow's election. The arguments for and against tonight come from the Speaker of the Idaho House of Representatives, Tom Stivers of Twin Falls. He's in favor of the change, and political scientist Tony Stewart of Coeur d'Alene, who is against. Mr. Speaker, let me start with you. Why should folks tomorrow vote for this?
Well, I think the criteria should be addressed as to whether or not it's good representation. And I feel very strongly that it is not good representation to have large flotarial districts with state senators and state representatives trying to represent all the way from 125 to 135,000 people in those flotarial districts. It perhaps would work satisfactory in large impacted metropolitan areas, but where we have a broad area to cover, I think in the flotarial district in Magic Valley, we count nearly 195 to 200 miles from the southeast corner of that flotarial district to the northwest corner. And it's practically impossible for a state senator or representative to adequately represent those people in that broad expanse of geographical areas, especially when it's divided by a canyon, an immense canyon, and a mountain range.
And the reason we have these large flotarials is because of the provision about not dividing counties.
Not dividing counties into other districts, right. Splitting counties into other districts.
Okay. Mr. Stewart, you wrote that plan or had a major hand in writing that plan that has those flotarial districts in place now. You heard the Speaker's criticism about not good representation. How do you respond?
Well, in all due respect to the Speaker, that's not the issue at all here tomorrow on HJR 5. We should stress the fact that there were 12 plans before the court. Also, I talked to a state senator today who had introduced some plans that almost passed the legislature. In fact, of the 12 plans presented to the court, 7 of them that were available with low deviations had no flotarials at all. There are other issues at stake tomorrow, and one of those is states' rights, another one is local control. If we remove this from the Constitution, that's why we urge the people to vote no on HJR 5, we are really tearing counties asunder as far as legislative districts are concerned. Counties mean something in this state, and I believe people who believe in local government should support that. Also, if we remove this from the Constitution, we're left only with federal guidelines, and I contend that we should have state guidelines under states' rights as well as federal guidelines. And the final point is that if we remove this restriction on the legislature, we have given them really a free license to go back to gerrymandering, dividing cities, counties, mountain ranges in any way they want. I'm not here to defend 14B. I'm here to say that we should protect the counties and states' rights.
Well, let me just take each one of those points
yes.
point by point here with the county, or with the Speaker, I should say, that the counties mean something.
Well, I don't question the counties mean something. It doesn't seem to mean much with school districts and highway districts and things like that. And I fail to see...
Excuse me, because they cross
county boundaries. A lot of school districts cross county boundaries. I think the thing that we're missing here in Mr. Stewart's argument, we were operating satisfactorily since 1966 with dividing counties into separate districts to try and reach an equitable balance. Now, he's making the argument of gerrymandering. I fail to find in examination of the record anywhere any overt act of gerrymandering as it's commonly defined. As a matter of fact, the last reapportionment we made perhaps benefited the minority party rather than the majority party that was doing the reapportionment. So the old saw of gerrymandering just doesn't fit Idaho, and I don't think ever has.
Mr. Stewart, how about that?
Yes, I wish the Speaker could have been in court for 3 weeks when we heard legislators, one after another one, coming before the court and admitting that they gerrymandered. In fact, one legislator told me, I stole the precincts fair and square and I'm going to keep them. There were just many, many witnesses. In fact, all over the nation, and not just Idaho, gerrymandering is taking place. And anyone who doesn't believe that, I'd have a bridge, I'd be happy to sell them.
So gerrymandering, as you see it, is really maybe more important than almost any other issue here.
There's a fundamental point in that. I'm so glad to get to answer that. And that is, if legislators create what we call safe districts, they manipulate precincts and go across county boundaries and so forth, and create a district that is safe for either the Democrats or the Republicans, there is no use to hold that election. We know the results before the election, and consequently, we've attacked the heart of democracy when we do that.
And the point is that keeping the counties in place makes it more difficult for the legislature to do that.
A number of legislators have told me that if we keep these county boundaries, we can't gerrymander, so we may even have to give up the process and let a commission do it.
Mr. Speaker?
Well, it's funny that
Heard this before, haven't
yes,
you?
we've had a Citizens Commission design 14B, and that's what we're confronted with right now. That, in effect, was a Citizens Commission, and was presented to the court, and I testified in that court case, and I was there. So it wasn't news to me what was being said up there. But I fail to find any proof yet of absolute gerrymandering in any degree that would affect anyone's race. Isn't it strange that the two proponents now of particular stature in the state that are going around wanting to defeat HDR 5 are what I call has-beens, not in a derogatory sense, but Governor Smiley has been a governor, and he has been an attorney general. Governor Andrus has been a governor, and he has been a member of the legislature. Neither one of them complained during the time they held those offices that we were violating the state constitution or anything else. In fact, Governor Smiley was the governor that called a special session that did the reapportionment the way we've had it for the past 18 years.
Mr. Stewart, the Speaker's got a point, doesn't he?
No, I do not agree. We're honored that we have bipartisan support from Smiley and Democrat Cecil Anderson. Individuals, Republicans in the North and Democrats. And there's all kind of evidence of gerrymandering. As I've indicated, it's been in court. There's districts that have run over all kind of mountain ranges, and there's all kind of legislators that we involve ourselves in gerrymandering. We do try to create a safe district. It's too much of a temptation when a legislator has to draw their own district that they would, in all cases, say, well, I don't care where those lines are, and therefore, through having some good guidelines in the Constitution, as Thomas Jefferson told us, put some restraints on anyone who has power. Do not give absolute power to any branch of government or any level. And I want to stress once again, we really are talking states' rights and local government and their importance through the constitutional protection that we now have.
I know you said a moment ago that the flotillas are not really an issue, but a lot of people do see them as an issue because they do exist now.
But what I'm trying to make the point, Mark, is that under our Constitution, if we keep this provision and vote no on HJR 5, there are all these other plans that are available, and the court has already invited the legislature in the past, in 1983 and 1984, to adopt their own plan. One senator told me...
So we don't need to have flotillas?
No, we don't. I got them before me here now, and I said there are 7 plans without flotillas. If the legislature would put aside gerrymandering and so forth, and just come up with a plan that's fair to the people and follows some really lines that we understand, such as county boundaries.
Mr. Speaker?
Well, about all Mr. Stewart can talk about is gerrymandering, and that is really not the issue. You know, when he said about a representative can design his own district, that's not true. We had a committee composed of members of the legislature clear across the state that were trying to design a reapportionment plan that would not violate the degree of error in population trends that the federal courts would allow. But you know, in our 70...
Let me just interrupt, though. There is some motivation, isn't there, for legislators to create a good district for themselves if they possibly can?
I suspect the only one that I was aware of was over in the Pocatello area. And I think that was so minute, and the fact there was it probably benefited the minority party member as much as the majority party member in the long run. As a matter of fact, the flotarial districts that we've got now under 14B are going to help the Republican Party in this state. I should be out supporting 14B because we're going to elect more people in both the House and the Senate under 14B than we did when we were didn't come under 14B. So I should be out supporting the defeat of House Joint Resolution number 5. But I can't see that it's good representation, and I think that's what we're getting at. I don't see how A person in Canyon County is going to represent from the southwest corner of Canyon County is going to effectively represent someone in McCall, Idaho. That boggles my imagination.
The Speaker continues.
Final point. We're
Yes,
out of time.
the Speaker continues to refuse to recognize the fact that there are other plans available that the legislature could adopt that don't tear our counties asunder, and I would urge them to take a look at those plans. They've already been drawn.
Just in a word, can you defeat this, Mr. Stewart?
I'm very optimistic that the people are going to support local, county government, and states' rights on tomorrow.
Let me close by saying that's why I want to support House Joint Resolution number 5, so we can go back and properly reapportion by the legislature, the body that's charged with that responsibility. That's the way we should do it. That's why we should vote for House Joint Resolution number 5.
Well, you're a good advocate, both of you. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us. Mr. Stewart, thank you, sir.
Very much.
Our second issue tonight, and another you'll be asked to decide on Tuesday, is an initiative. Through a process of gathering signatures on petitions, the issue of removing the state's 4-cent sales tax on food has been placed on the November ballot. The issue has spawned a lot of debate all across the state. Liz Merrill of the group Idaho Fair Share is here tonight to argue in favor of the initiative. Republican Senator Dane Watkins of Idaho Falls will argue against. Senator Watkins is a member of the legislature's Finance and Appropriations Committee. Ms. Merrill, why should folks be in favor of this tomorrow?
Well, a sales tax on groceries is the most unfair tax there is because it places the largest burden on the people with the least amount of money. For instance, a family that earns $4,000 a year spends approximately 30% of their income on groceries, where a family that earns $40,000 a year spends only about 6% of their money on groceries.
So it's a matter of fairness.
That's what we feel.
Senator Watkins, is it a matter of fairness or is it something else?
I look at the total economic picture of the situation. I share the concern of the lower income people, but I look at the state's budget. When we spend 75% of the budget for education, I think it's going to have a definite effect on education as a whole. You can't spend 75 cents out of every dollar without affecting what we're going to do with education in the state of Idaho. It's my belief that if we take $15 million from the general fund, it's going to affect K through 12, our universities and our colleges.
So, in fact, I think I read the other day where you were quoted as saying that it might even affect the second year of the public school, so-called public school reform package that the legislature has approved the first part of.
Very much so. We made some strong commitments in the legislature last session, and this has accumulated over maybe 10 years that we want to achieve excellence in education. And with the second phase of the Career Ladder program, we've got $10 million there, perhaps the funding of the equity portion of it, maybe $13 million. You've got cities and counties, you've got $5 million there that they won't receive. If we need to change something, it's in the grocery tax allowance that we presently have at $15. I think that could be raised to maybe $20 or $25, and that's how I'd like to approach the situation. But when you take this kind of money out, and I'm assuming right now that we're going to repeal this allowance if this thing passes, but if we don't, there's $29 million that's out of the general fund. I don't think we have that kind of money, and I don't want to hurt education at this critical point in our state's history.
Ms. Merrill, that's the argument that most of the opponents are making. How do you counter it?
Well, if you look at the history of taxes in Idaho, you can see that individuals have paid the largest share of the tax burden since before the sales tax went into effect. The sales tax, when it went into effect in 1965, was never supposed to be on groceries. That's why there was the grocery tax credit. The grocery tax credit hasn't kept pace with the sales tax and with the cost of groceries. Our figures show that if you were going to refund an adequate amount to what it costs or what a family spends on sales tax, it would be about a $40 per person tax credit, which would cost the state more money than removing the sales tax from food. Another thing that we've noticed is that the corporate tax breaks that have been passed, for instance in '82 and '83, cost the state over $30 million. Now, individuals don't have lobbyists at the state legislature like some of the corporations do. And this is a chance for individuals to fight back. We fought back with the 50% initiative. We're fighting back here.
Senator Watkins, a lot of folks will buy that argument, I suppose, that everyone else has received a break, if you will, a tax break of one sort or another.
I think what Liz is saying is a matter of the corporations not paying their taxes because they haven't had the profits to do so. And I think now that the economy is on the upturn, they'll pay more taxes. what we've seen in the legislature is a lot of exemptions. Here we are on one hand saying we shouldn't have any more exemption, but this will create another exemption. My attitude is if we need to raise that grocery tax allowance from $15 to $20, that can be done. And when we raise the sales tax from 3 to 4%, I think that's a logical choice that we should go up there. The low-income people, the ones that aren't paying the taxes, if there's a problem there, there's federal programs with food stamps and other help in the counties and other charity groups that we can help with. But to change our whole tax structure and to take one portion of it and zero in on it and say we're going to change this for this reason only, I don't think it's good. I think we've got to maintain stability and have equity in our tax structure and be as broad-based as we can. We've got sales tax, income tax, and property taxes. They've been good for 90 years, and we want to keep that balance there. I look at the tourism industry. It's our third largest industries. Why shouldn't we have them pay this kind of a tax when they come to our state? We've got migrant workers. They haven't supported governments on the local and state level to speak of, not filling out income taxes as such. They should pay a tax on food. We need to have that income there for education, and that's my concern. As a chairman of the Local Government Taxation Committee in the Senate, I can see what will happen if this thing passes. We won't have enough money to do everything we'd like to do. With the strong programs in education, we need this money for education.
Ms. Merrill, a lot of folks are saying that if this passes tomorrow, that we will by necessity be forced into some sort of tax increase as a practical political matter, taking into account the points you made earlier about other ways of doing it. But as a practical matter, that could be the trade-off, couldn't it?
I suppose so, but I think that what the this is a move for tax reform as much as it's a move for a tax break. The individuals have been paying taxes, the heaviest burden of the taxes over the years in the state of Idaho. The 50-50 initiative returns some of the parity to that pillar of property tax. This will return some fairness to the pillar of sales tax. And that the legislature can look, if they search their souls and their hearts, for some other places to raise that revenue that don't raise it off the backs of middle and low-income people.
How would you gauge the support for this at this point?
We feel that it's fairly strong. We think that will pass tomorrow.
Okay. Senator Watkins, in your area, Idaho Falls, how are people feeling about this? It's always easy to vote to take a tax off yourself.
I think so, and what people don't realize is it's going to have to be made up some other way, and I have a difficult time judging it right now. I think there's more groups coming out against this proposal, the Cities Association, the County Association, the Taxpayers Group. I say the retailers themselves, how are you going to administer what is food and what is not food? So I think there's been more opposition maybe in the last week or 10 days. It's hard to say how it's going to go, but as you know, we'll do what the people want. This is their initiative, but it is my concern as a member of the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee and the Local Government Taxation Committee. I have some strong reservations on it because I don't want to hurt education in our state of Idaho.
Let me just finally, in the minute or so that remains, go back, Senator, to this question of fairness. Of all the people like Ms. Merrill will make the point that of all the things that we ought to not tax, maybe food should be one of the things that we don't tax because it is the most basic necessity.
I think that's a good point, and that's why we have the grocery tax allowance right now at $15. Perhaps that should be raised to $20 or $25, and I think legislation can be drawn to do that, and I think that's a more fair way to do it rather than not be able to hit the tourists, hit the migrant workers, hit everybody that's coming into the state. I'd rather have the broad-based tax, spread it out as far as we can, as much as we can, then come back with the allowance and raise that up if we have to.
Ms. Merrill, I would assume, and just to give you the last word here, that you don't have much faith in the legislature increasing that grocery tax credit if this does not pass.
That's true.
No.
This is one of those things that's always inconvenient to do. They say, well, you're right, it's fair, but this just isn't the year to do it. Well, it's the year to do it.
You're saying it is the year to do it. Well, we thank you for saying it here tonight. Appreciate it. And Senator Watkins is saying this is not the year to do it. We thank you for being with us,
Thank
sir.
you.
Finally now, I'll look at the third issue that will be on the ballot in Idaho tomorrow, a constitutional change in state water law. The proposal would give Idaho legislators the power to amend or reject amendments to the state water plan. The State Water Resource Board now has that responsibility. The arguments on this issue come tonight from State Senator Laird Ney of Kimberly, who favors the change, and from Bob Hammes of St. Mary's. He's a newspaper publisher there and also a member of the Water Resource Board. Senator Ney, why should folks vote in favor of this constitutional amendment?
Well, Mark, it was at the time the water board was established, I believe it was the intent of the people and certainly the intent of the legislature that there be some legislative oversight of the plan. As an offshoot of the Swan Falls controversy, the Idaho Supreme Court ruled that the language which was used in the amendment and in the enabling legislation was inadequate to provide that. So I think what we really have a question of whether or not we're going to restore what I think is very limited legislative oversight of the state water plan. I think that's important from several standpoints, but one gets back to the basic Jeffersonian principle of limiting power, dividing the power. The Water Resource Board, and I think we've had very good water resources boards, I think is the right place to plan Idaho's water future and set out broad policies. But some of those policies and some of the parts of the water plan affect individuals' rights. They establish minimum stream flows, they allocate water in basins, they determine which communities which will grow, which communities will not grow, which rivers will dry up, which rivers will not dry up.
In other words, very big public policy
Very
decisions.
big public policy that affect people's basic rights. And it just seems important that 150 elected people, one man, one vote, representing all segments of the state, as opposed to 8, albeit very good at this time at any rate, appointed officials, is a more representative form of government to balance out one person's rights against another.
Mr. Hammes, powerful arguments from the senator.
They are. However, there are a couple things I should like to point out. One, that if this idea that the legislature must have oversight on every board, are they going to oversee the Department of Highways, the Highway Board, the Parole Board, the Board of Education? Is there to be a total oversight on everything or simply on water policy? We think that professionals in the Department of Water Resources, overseen and directed by a body of apolitical citizens. We are not political in spite of all the propaganda that's going into this campaign. The law prevents us from being political. The governor appoints, the Senate confirms or refuses.
And no more, it can't be a majority of one political party.
No, only 4 of one political party. There's distribution throughout the state. 4 of the members must come from different areas. They're designated as such. This is not a political group in spite of the propaganda that's being put out in this campaign that we are.
So in a nutshell, don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Precisely. It's interesting that it's suggested that the legislature should have some oversight on our water policy when the water policy itself says a legislative committee should be appointed to work with the Water Resource Board in implementing the state water plan. That committee has never been appointed. It has never met with the Water Board. It's there in the water plan, but the legislature is not using it.
I think Mr. Hammes is arguing that there could be too much politics in this process, Senator.
Well, we don't want too much politics, but we certainly, I think, want politics in the good sense that when we get down to decisions that affect people's individual rights, we do want representative government, we do want accountability. We want to be able to throw the scoundrels out if they aren't doing a good job. The oversight provided in this constitutional amendment is very limited, certainly much more limited than was the case prior to the Supreme Court decision, which I think really broke what was already fixed. We're trying to restore, I think, what the Supreme Court broke. In fact, the measure was rewritten in the committee I happened to chair at least 6 times to try to come up with language which would minimize the legislative role. The legislature must act within 60 days after submission of changes in the water plan. By the way, the existing water plan continues as is. Any changes must be submitted first day of the session, acted upon within 60 days, or the original Water Board proposal stands.
Let me ask you a question about public participation in this process. The board now, the Water Resource Board, has a policy of conducting lots of public hearings on these major policy changes. If this amendment were adopted, wouldn't that in a way sort of undermine that input process?
No, I don't think that it does any more than it does with any other branch of government. Certainly the legislature does oversee the executive branch of government, and in fact, in most cases, we're able to change rules and regulations simply by concurrent resolution. And concurrent resolution is the way we used to change the water plan. That isn't submitted to the governor. The new amendment says that any changes the legislature makes must be submitted to the governor for his veto. Further checks and balances on legislative power.
What about the idea of just a further check and balance in this extremely important area?
What I should like to point out is that the Water Board, in going to the public and getting their opinion, is more open to the average citizen than the legislature. Since its beginning, the Water Board has held 78 different meetings around the state, public. We're in the process of public meetings now. We go to the people. We don't ask them to come to Boise on Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. or at 4 in the afternoon in the middle of a blizzard month. We go to the people and get their opinion. I think the Idaho legislature has done a marvelous job in listening to people. But I think the very structure that they have 1,000 bills to handle every session, they have innumerable committee meetings, simply mitigates their being able to spend enough time, attention, and study to such a vital thing as the water problems.
Senator, I know you spend a lot of time on these issues, but do your colleagues spend that much time?
Well, there's no intent here, and I think certainly no practical effect of reducing or minimizing the public input which the Water Board should and will have. In effect, it means there's going to be on top of that another little bit more, not nearly as much in terms of time and effort that the Water Board put in, but one last shot in the legislative committees before the water plan really goes into effect. So if some gross error is made, if there is some terrible conflict that comes up, there's one more chance for public input.
Mr. Hammes, as a practical matter in this dynamic political process that the board operates in and the legislature operates in, wouldn't it be easier for some special interest group, if you will, to influence your board than it would be to influence 100 or more people in the state legislature? I think as a practical matter.
I think not. As a practical matter, we were discussing a little earlier what it costs to run an election these days and what a fortune it's going to cost to run in a flotarial district to beat an opponent, incumbent. We are dependent on no one, and we need favors from no one. We need help from no one. In an election, in an effort to pass something, we don't have to trade off with another senator. I'll vote for yours if you vote for mine.
So there's some insulation.
Oh, yes. And this insulation is needed in such a highly technical thing. The senator mentioned where the Water Board would dry up a river or restrict the growth of a town. The river's going to dry up because of the use of the water, not the Water Board won't dry up the river.
Okay,
Similarly, wells will not dry up, but only through the use of them.
Give the senator the last 15 seconds.
Okay.
Well, the point is the Water Board can establish minimum flows at 0 and hence allow the river to be dried up. But there have been accusations over time, which I think are generally unfounded, that a governor will stack, for instance, the Water Board. He's the sole person that appoints members of the Water Resources Board. Been accused of being stacked with environmentalists, with developers at one time or another. And I think you're correct, Mark, that certainly 150 legislators representing all corners of the state is a more representative body than an 8-member board.
Got to go, gentlemen. Senator and Mr. Hammes,
Thank
you
you
for being with us. All that's left to do is vote tomorrow. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.